I want to start this story with a truth I never thought I would say out loud. A truth that still shakes something inside me every time I think about it. You can love your children more than anything in this world, and still, they can break your heart in ways you never expected. Not because they are bad, not because they mean to hurt you, but because life changes them, and sometimes it changes you, and you don't realize how far apart you've grown until something happens that forces you to face it. For me, that moment came the day I learned that my kids, the same kids my wife and I raised with patience and love, sold her jewelry. Not by accident, not out of misunderstanding. They did it quietly, behind my back, while I was still mourning her. While our home still smelled like the lavender lotion she used every night. While her clothes were still folded in the drawers because I couldn't bring myself to move them. I remember the morning I found out. It was one of those quiet mornings, the kind that almost feel hollow. The kind where the world seems to move on without you, even though your heart is still stuck in a moment that refuses to let go. I was in the kitchen, making coffee, staring at the empty chair across from me. That chair had belonged to my wife, Lily. She loved the mornings. She used to sit there, drinking her tea, humming a tune she said she didn't even realize she was humming. It had been a year since she passed, but some mornings, it still felt like she should walk into the room any minute. That morning, I opened a drawer to look for a notepad I used to keep near the refrigerator. Instead of the notepad, I found an empty velvet box. One of Lily's. A small black box with a faint rose imprint on the lid. I knew that box. She kept her engagement ring in it whenever she took it off to cook or knead dough. But the box was empty. And worse, it was placed in that drawer where it didn't belong. Almost shoved in, like someone was hiding it quickly. At first, I thought maybe I had misplaced the ring months ago and forgotten. Grief does strange things to your memory. It blurs moments. It hides details. It makes you doubt what you know. But something inside me felt wrong. That quiet wrongness that makes your chest tighten. So I checked the drawer where Lily's jewelry was supposed to be. The wooden box was there. But when I lifted the lid, my breath caught in my throat. Empty. Completely empty. Not a ring. Not a bracelet. Not a necklace. Not the small gold earrings she wore on our wedding day, because she said they made her feel simple and beautiful at the same time. Gone. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring into the empty space. Not breathing. Not thinking. Just feeling something cold settle in my stomach. I remember whispering to myself, no, this can't be. But the truth was right there in front of me. At first, I thought we had been robbed. Maybe someone broke in. But the house was fine. Nothing else was touched. Electronics were still in place. Cash was still in the drawer where I kept it. And then, slowly, painfully, another thought crept in. A thought I didn't want to believe. My kids had been visiting the past few months. More than usual, actually. My daughter, Emily, came over often to check on me. She brought groceries, made dinner sometimes, told me I needed to get out more. My son, Mark, dropped by whenever his work allowed. He was always polite, always distant, always seeming like he was in a different world. And both of them knew where Lily kept her jewelry. They knew because Lily had shown them years ago. She wanted them to know the stories behind each piece. It wasn't until I saw the empty drawers that the small things started to make sense. The moments that felt off. The times they avoided looking at that jewelry box when they passed it. The way they changed the subject whenever I talked about going through Lily's belongings slowly, at my own pace. But I still didn't want to believe they would do something like that. Not them. Not my children. So, I decided to breathe. To slow down. To think like my wife would think. Lily always said, "Don't jump to conclusions, love. People deserve the chance to explain." But the truth is, I didn't even want an explanation. I wanted the jewelry back. Not because of the gold or diamonds, but because those pieces held her stories. Our stories. Our life. Pieces of her heart, frozen in time. I stood there that morning, staring into the empty wooden box, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger. Not sadness. But something heavier. A quiet kind of heartbreak. The kind that doesn't explode but sinks slowly, like a stone dropping into deep water. I took a deep breath and closed the lid. Then I sat down at the edge of the bed, where her pillow still rested against the headboard, and I let the silence wrap around me. For a moment, I wondered if I had failed as a father. If somewhere along the years, I had missed a sign. If maybe I wasn't as close to my kids as I believed. If maybe Lily had always been the glue between us, the gentle voice that kept us connected. Without her, maybe we had all drifted. But I didn't want to think that way. I didn't want to believe my family had cracks running through it. I wanted to believe that whatever happened, there was at least a reason. A misunderstanding. A mistake. Yet deep inside, something told me there was more to this. Something I wasn't seeing. I spent that entire day replaying memories. Small moments. Holidays. Arguments. Laughter. The way my daughter used to grab Lily's hand before crossing the street. The way my son used to sit beside Lily when he was sad, because he said she made things feel less heavy. And I wondered, when did we stop being that kind of family? I didn't confront them right away. I needed the truth, not assumptions. So the next morning, I decided to call an appraiser. Not because I wanted to sell anything, but because I wanted to know if maybe, just maybe, something had been taken to be repaired or cleaned. Something I didn't know about. But deep inside, I knew I was preparing myself for the truth. That phone call changed everything. The man on the other end was kind, calm, professional. His name was Harris. He ran a small independent appraisal service and agreed to meet me later that afternoon. I remember cleaning the house before he came. Not because he would judge it, not because he cared, but because I wanted the place to look like my wife was still here. Like her spirit still touched every corner. I placed the empty jewelry box on the dining table. Then I sat down and waited. When Harris arrived, he greeted me with a gentle handshake. He was an older man, probably in his late 60s, with silver hair and warm eyes. He walked slowly, respectfully, like someone who understood grief without needing to be told. I explained what happened. I told him I believed some jewelry was missing. I didn't mention my kids. I didn't mention my fears. Just the facts. He nodded and opened his notebook. "Can you tell me what pieces you're missing?" he asked. So I told him, piece by piece. Necklace, bracelet, the wedding earrings, the ring I gave her for our 10th anniversary, her mother's brooch that she only wore on holidays, the bracelet she bought in Italy on our honeymoon. When I finished listing everything, Harris looked at me with a quiet understanding. "That's quite a collection," he said softly. "And each one sounds like it meant something." "It did," I replied. "They meant everything." He asked if I had photos. I did. Lily wore those pieces often, and I had dozens of pictures. As soon as he saw the pictures, something in his expression changed. Not dramatically, not obviously, but enough. He recognized something. That look told me he knew more than he was saying. He leaned back and exhaled slowly. "I've seen most of these," he said quietly. Those words hit me like cold water. "You've seen them?" I asked. "How? Where?" He sighed and closed his notebook. "I can't give you details until I check my records," he said. "But I can tell you this, some of these pieces came across my desk recently. Very recently. I felt the chair beneath me grow still, like the air had stopped moving. Someone brought them in for appraisal?" I asked. He nodded. "Yes." My throat tightened. "Who?" And that was when the truth began to unfold, slowly, painfully, like a wound being revealed under a bandage. Harris didn't give me a name that day, but he gave me enough to know that the truth wasn't far away. He promised to check his system and call me by evening. He even apologized, though I could tell he wasn't sure what he was apologizing for yet. When he left, I sat alone with the silence of the house settling around me. That night, I got the call, and the call told me something I wasn't ready to hear. Something that shook me. Something that made me realize that the people we love the most can still make choices that break us, even if they don't mean to. That night was the beginning of everything that followed. The truth, the confrontation, the betrayal, and the lesson I never wanted to learn. A lesson about love, about grief, about family, about trust, and about the unexpected ways life tests the human heart. And that was only the beginning. When the phone rang that evening, I was sitting alone in the living room. The daylight had already faded, and the room was lit only by a single lamp in the corner. It cast a warm glow against the framed photos on the wall. Pictures of birthdays, vacations, holidays, and the small milestones that made up a life I no longer felt connected to. Every picture with Lily seemed to pull at a thread inside my chest. I wasn't ready for the truth, but I also knew I had run out of places to hide from it. I let the phone ring twice before answering. Somehow, I needed those seconds, like taking small breaths before walking into cold water. When I picked up, Harris's voice came through softly. There was a heaviness in it that made my stomach tighten. "Mr. Reynolds," he said gently, "thank you for your patience." I checked my records. There was a short pause, just long enough for me to feel my heartbeat in my throat. I braced myself, even though I didn't know what I was bracing for. I do recognize several of your wife's pieces. My fingers curled around the arm of the chair. When did they come in? Less than 3 weeks ago, he said. A couple of them even earlier. Maybe a month. I swallowed hard. And who brought them? He hesitated. It was the kind of silence people give when they know the truth will cut deep, but they have to offer it anyway. A young woman, he said finally. Early 30s. Brown hair. Soft-spoken. She said the pieces belonged to her mother. My heart sank. That description matched my daughter, Emily. Not perfectly, but close enough. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling as the truth pressed down like weight on my chest. My voice felt smaller when I spoke again. Was her name Emily? I'm not allowed to share names without consent, he said gently. But she paid with a card. The last name matched yours. My breath left me slowly. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. The room felt strangely quiet. Even the house seemed to hold its breath. There was also a man who came in on a separate day, Harris added after a moment. Tall. Mid-30s. Looked rushed. He brought the ring. That was my son, Mark. I didn't need more details to know. 2 visits. 2 different times. 2 of my children. Pieces of Lily, taken from her drawer while I was still grieving. I closed my eyes and let the silence stretch between us. I didn't blame Harris. He didn't owe me comfort or reassurance. He was just the messenger. I understand this may be painful, he said quietly. I'm very sorry. Thank you, I whispered. You did what I asked. Mr. Reynolds, he added cautiously, the jewelry hasn't been sold. At least not through me. It was only appraised. If you want, I can flag the pieces. If they come in again, I can notify you. Something inside me softened a little. Even in disappointment, kindness still existed. It didn't erase the pain, but it reminded me the world wasn't entirely unkind. Yes, I said. Please do that. We ended the call a moment later. When I put the phone down, I sat in the quiet for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I didn't even move. I just let the truth settle inside me like a stone dropped into still water. My own children. My daughter. My son. I wasn't angry, not in the loud, explosive way some people imagine. My emotion was quieter, heavier, something closer to grief than rage. Something slow and deep, like a bruise blooming beneath the skin. Why didn't they tell me? Why didn't they trust me enough to talk to me first? Why did they act like Lily's things were theirs to take? But the real question, the one that kept replaying in my mind, was even harder to face. What were they going through that made them do this? Parents want to believe they know their children better than anyone else. But sometimes life creates distance that you don't notice until it's already grown into something unrecognizable. Maybe I had missed something. Maybe I had missed a lot. For the next hour, I walked through the house slowly, touching the quiet corners, the shelves, the framed photos, the little reminders of the life Lily and I had built. I kept thinking about the jewelry drawer, how she protected those pieces, not because of their price, but because of their meaning. She used to say they were little memories made solid. Now those memories were out there somewhere, in the hands of people who didn't understand the weight they carried. I thought about calling my children right away. I even picked up the phone once. But something stopped me. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was sadness. Maybe it was the simple truth that I wasn't ready to hear their explanations, whatever they were. I decided to sleep on it, or at least lie down and pretend I could sleep. But sleep didn't come. Instead, memories came, slow and gentle at first, then sharper. I remembered the day Lily bought the small gold bracelet in Italy during our honeymoon. The weather had been warm, and she was laughing about how she didn't need more jewelry, but still wanted something small to remember the trip. She loved simple things, not expensive ones. The bracelet wasn't fancy. It caught the sunlight in this soft way that matched her personality. I remembered the emerald pendant I gave her on our anniversary. She cried when she opened it, not because of the gift itself, but because she said the color reminded her of the dress she wore on our first date. She always held emotions gently, the same way she held people. And now all those memories had become objects someone took without asking. My children, of all people. It stung in a way I didn't know how to describe. The next morning, I made a decision. I needed to talk to them. Not in anger, not in accusation, but in truth. Because silence only lets wounds deepen. I called my daughter first. She answered after a few rings, sounding tired, like she had been rushing or worrying about something. "Hey, Dad," she said. "Everything okay? I need to talk to you," I replied. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Can you come by the house today? She hesitated. Just a few seconds. But that hesitation told me she already knew why I was calling. Sure, she said. I can be there in an hour. When I hung up, I felt a small crack open inside me. The kind that comes before a difficult conversation, when you know you're about to step into a truth you didn't ask for. While I waited, I straightened the living room. Not because it was messy, but because talking about something so personal required a space that felt grounded. I placed the empty jewelry box on the coffee table, not to accuse her with it, but because it was part of the truth. When Emily arrived, she looked nervous. Her eyes moved around the room before they settled on the empty wooden box on the table. Her shoulders tensed. "Dad," she said quietly, "what's going on?" I didn't want to corner her. I didn't want to make her feel small. I just wanted the truth. "Sit down," I said softly. She sat across from me, clasping her hands together in her lap. She looked older than I remembered, not in a physical sense, but in the way life wears you down slowly when you don't talk about what hurts. "Emily," I said, "I know about the jewelry." Her eyes closed, like the words hit her physically. When she opened them again, they were wet, but she didn't cry. "Dad, I can explain." "I hope you will," I said, "because I don't want to assume. I just want to understand." She took a deep breath, the kind people take when they're trying to gather courage. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said. "I never wanted that." I nodded gently. I didn't interrupt. "I was going to tell you," she continued, "but then things got complicated. And then I got scared. And then, I don't know. I kept waiting for the right moment." She looked down at her hands. "I only took a few pieces," she said softly. "I promise I didn't mean to take everything." The words felt like small stabs. My own daughter. My little girl who used to hold Lily's hand and ask her to braid her hair. "Why?" I asked quietly. She hesitated again. And then the truth began to reveal itself, slowly, painfully, layer by layer. But her truth wasn't the whole truth. Not yet. And what I didn't know then was that my son's truth was something very different. Something deeper. Something darker. Something I was completely unprepared for. When Emily finally began to speak, her voice sounded small, almost unfamiliar. It wasn't the confident tone she used when talking about work or when giving advice about how I should get out of the house more. This was softer, fragile, like she was peeling back a layer she had been afraid to show. She kept her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her eyes were lowered, as if she couldn't bring herself to face me yet. And I just sat there quietly, because sometimes silence is the only way to make room for the truth. "Dad," she began, "I know what it looks like. And I know I should have talked to you first. But I didn't take anything because I didn't care about Mom's memory. It wasn't about that at all." She paused and swallowed hard. "It was about trying to fix a problem, one I didn't want you to know about." I didn't rush her. I didn't push. I just nodded, letting her know I was listening. She took a slow breath. "It started a few months after Mom died. I was trying to help Mark, and it got out of control." My eyebrows lifted slightly. "Your brother?" Her eyes flicked up for a moment, full of guilt. "Mark hasn't told you," she said, "because he didn't want to disappoint you. But he's been struggling, Dad. Really struggling." I leaned back in the chair, feeling the edges of something larger beginning to form. Struggling how? Financially? Mentally? Legally? I didn't ask aloud. I let her continue. "His business is failing," she said. "He had been hiding debts for years, even from me at first. He never wanted help. He said everything would fix itself. But it didn't." She rubbed a hand over her forehead, her voice trembling. "Then one night, he called me. He sounded scared. Not panicked scared. I had never heard him like that. He said he was out of options. He needed money. Fast. Or he was going to lose everything." I felt something in me twist. Mark had always been strong-willed, proud, independent to the point of stubbornness. And he inherited that stubbornness from me. "So you gave him money?" I asked softly. "I gave him everything I had," she said. "I emptied my savings. I sold some of my furniture. I stopped going out. I did everything. But it still wasn't enough. That hurt me more than I expected. Because I didn't know any of this. Because she carried this weight alone when she shouldn't have had to. And then," she continued, "I thought about Mom's jewelry." Her voice cracked a little. "I knew you weren't ready to go through her things yet. I knew those pieces meant the world to you. But I kept thinking, what would Mom do if she were here? Would she have let Mark drown? Would she have ignored him?" My chest tightened. Because she wasn't wrong. Lily had a heart big enough to carry the world. She always believed in helping people, even when it hurt her. So I took a few pieces, Emily whispered. Only the ones I thought were less personal. The ones Mom didn't talk about as much. I closed my eyes for a moment. There were no less personal pieces. Every piece had been touched by Lily, worn by her, loved by her. But I didn't say that. Not yet. I only planned to let Mark use them as collateral, she said, just until he got back on his feet. I thought we could put everything back before you even noticed. I really believed he would recover. Her voice grew quieter. But he didn't. The room seemed to shrink around us. The air felt heavy. Not angry, just sad. When I took them to get appraised, she said, the man, Harris, he looked at me like he knew something was wrong. He asked if the pieces belonged to me. I lied. She winced, as if the memory hurt her. I hated myself for it. But I kept thinking I was helping my brother, helping our family, trying to protect you. I thought you had already been through enough after losing Mom. She finally looked up at me, her eyes glassy. Dad, I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I thought I was doing the right thing. I breathed slowly, letting her words settle, letting the truth fill the quiet space between us. Part of me understood her. Part of me even admired her loyalty, her willingness to carry so much pain alone. But another part of me, a quieter, deeper part, felt a bruise forming. Lily's memory wasn't just an emotional idea. It was something physical, something real, something sacred. And my daughter had touched that sacred thing without asking. Not out of greed, not out of selfishness, but out of desperation. Still it hurt. Emily, I said softly, I'm not angry at you. She blinked, stunned. Tears fell before she could stop them. I'm not, I repeated. But I'm disappointed. Not in your heart, but in the fact that you felt you had to go through this alone. You could have come to me. Her lips trembled. I didn't want to make you worry. You were grieving. You barely made it out of bed some days. I didn't want to add more to your pain. And there it was. Her truth. Her fear. Her love. Even in her mistake, she was trying to protect me. I exhaled slowly. A long breath that carried both sadness and relief. Where are the pieces now? I asked gently. She hesitated. Some of them, she said, are still with Harris. He hasn't sold them. They're just documented. Appraised. But the others? She swallowed. The others are with Mark. I nodded slowly. Does he still have them? I asked. Her silence answered for her. I don't know, she whispered. I hope so. A shadow moved across the room, like a quiet reminder that this story wasn't finished yet, that the real conversation, the one with my son, was still ahead, and that his truth would not be the same as hers. Emily, I said gently, thank you for telling me. She wiped her eyes. I want to make it right, she said. Whatever it takes. Her sincerity touched something inside me, and I realized she wasn't the one I needed to worry about. Because if Emily had been hiding this out of love, then Mark, who had taken pieces separately, had a different reason. A deeper one. A heavier one. And I needed to hear it. Can you ask your brother to come by? I said quietly. Emily nodded slowly, understanding the weight behind the request. I'll call him, she said. He won't like it. But I'll call. When she left, the silence returned, soft but haunting. The house felt full of memories. Full of Lily's voice in the walls. Full of questions that didn't yet have answers. I walked to the bedroom again. I opened the drawer, and I stared at the empty space where her treasures once rested. For the first time, I didn't look at the jewelry as objects. I looked at them as missing pieces of her story. Missing pieces of our life. Missing pieces of the home we built. And I wondered, quietly, painfully, how far my son had drifted from me. How much he had been hiding. And whether I was ready for the truth he was carrying. Because something told me that his truth was not going to be gentle. Not like Emily's. Not wrapped in love. Not softened by fear. No, his truth was going to hurt. In a way I wasn't prepared for. And soon, I would hear it. I didn't go to work the next morning. I didn't even pretend to. I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the sunlight crawling across the floor like it was mocking me for still being alive. My phone buzzed nonstop. Co-workers asking where I was. My mother asking if I'd visit this weekend. And Layla calling 6 times. I didn't answer a single one. By noon, I finally walked out of the apartment, not because I had anywhere to go, but because the silence inside those walls felt heavy enough to crush me. I ended up at the old riverside path we used to walk together when things were simple, back when love meant holding hands and sharing secrets, not hiding them. I sat on the bench we carved our initials into. They were still there. SL, mocking me like some cruel joke. That's when my phone buzzed again. A message from Layla. Please, just meet me once. I owe you the full truth. I typed a reply, deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too. In the end, I put the phone face down and stared at the river, wondering when everything had slipped so far from my grasp. And then someone sat beside me. At first I didn't look. I thought it was a stranger. But I felt the familiar scent of her perfume before I heard her voice. Samir, she whispered, trembling. I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to tell you everything you never knew. The pain hit me all over again, but I didn't move. Couldn't. She continued, her voice cracking. You think I betrayed you because I stopped loving you, she said. But that's not true. The truth is, I lied because I didn't know how to tell you the real reason I pushed you away. I finally looked at her. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had turned white. What reason? I asked, my voice barely holding steady. She swallowed hard. It's about the night 3 years ago. The night I told you I was working late. I froze. I wasn't at work, she continued. I was at the hospital. And I didn't tell you because I knew it would change everything between us. Her hands shook. Samir, I wasn't alone at that hospital. And the person I was with was someone from my past. Someone who came back that day without warning. Someone I never thought I'd see again. My heart felt like it dropped into the river. Layla wiped her eyes. I never cheated. But I did hide something from you. Something that started all of this. The wind picked up, cold against my skin. Who was it, Layla? I whispered. She looked away, tears running freely. My first love, she said. The one who disappeared years before I met you. He came back that night, dying, and begging me not to tell anyone. The ground seemed to shift beneath me. And that's when everything started to fall apart, she said quietly. Not because I wanted him, but because I didn't know how to tell you that I couldn't let go of the guilt. I stared at her, stunned, the weight of her words sinking in slowly, painfully, piece by piece. She reached for my hand, and I pulled away. Samir, she whispered, voice breaking. I never betrayed you with my body. But maybe I betrayed you with my silence. I didn't answer, because I didn't know what hurt more. The truth she finally revealed, or the truth she never trusted me with until now. I didn't walk away from her that day by the river, but I didn't stay either. I just sat there, numb, trying to absorb the weight of what Layla had confessed. The river kept moving, steady and indifferent, while my entire life felt suspended in air, like a breath I couldn't release. After a long, hollow silence, I finally stood up. I need time, I said quietly. Layla didn't beg. She didn't grab my arm or try to force words between us. She simply nodded, the kind of nod people give when they know they've lost the right to push. I'll wait, she whispered. However long you need. But I didn't believe her. Not because she was lying, but because everything between us now felt built on unsteady ground. Ground that could crack open at any moment. I left the riverside, not knowing where to go. The city was loud, chaotic, alive in ways I wasn't. Every honking car and laughing passerby felt like an insult to the stillness inside me. I walked until I had no idea how far I'd gone. My thoughts were tangled knots. Layla's confession, her first love, the hospital, the secrecy, the years of unexplained distance, all of it whirling like storm winds. By late afternoon, I found myself in front of my brother's apartment. He lived in a small, cluttered place that always smelled faintly of instant noodles and laundry detergent. When he opened the door, he didn't even say anything. He just took one look at my face and stepped aside to let me in. I sank onto his couch, elbows on my knees. You look like hell, he said gently. I didn't answer. Not at first. I just stared at the floor, feeling like someone had taken a vacuum to my chest. She told me something today, I finally murmured. He waited, patient in the way only older brothers who've seen you fall 1,000 times can be. She said she wasn't cheating. I continued. But she also said she hid something that night. Something big. I told him what Layla confessed. About the hospital. About the man from her past. About the guilt she'd carried alone, the emotional distance that followed. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he exhaled sharply, leaning back into the armchair that always made a cracking noise. Damn, he murmured. That's a lot. I rubbed my forehead, exhausted. What am I supposed to do with this? I asked. Feel it first, he said simply. Decide later. I hated that he was right. He handed me a glass of water, then sat across from me, elbows resting on his knees, mirroring my posture. "You know," he said quietly, "people don't always cheat with actions. Sometimes they cheat with memory, with nostalgia, with guilt, with the past." I shut my eyes. "But that doesn't mean they don't love the person standing in front of them." I opened my eyes again. "You think she loves me?" I asked. He shrugged. "I think she's hurting. And I think she didn't trust herself to tell you the truth until she had no choice left." I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know what to believe. "Stay here tonight," he said. "You shouldn't be alone." I accepted the offer, though I didn't sleep much. His couch was uncomfortable, the springs pressing against my back, but that wasn't the reason. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Layla sitting on that bench, broken, trembling, telling me a truth she should have told me years ago. By sunrise, I felt more exhausted than the night before. I went back to my apartment only long enough to shower and change. The place felt empty, colder than before, as if the arguments, the tension, the longing, and the silence had all evaporated overnight, leaving behind only the shell of a home. I didn't look at the framed photos on the wall. I couldn't. By afternoon, I found myself back at the riverside, not because I wanted to see Layla, but because it felt like the only place where my thoughts could breathe. But this time, the bench was empty. I sat alone, tracing the carved initials again. S.L., wondering how something so permanent had started to feel so fragile. Around 3 p.m., I received a message from her. "I'm at my mother's house. I won't come near you unless you ask. But if you ever want to hear the rest of it, I'll tell you everything." The rest of it? God, that scared me more than anything. The idea that what she had told me wasn't the full story, that there were pieces missing, edges she hadn't dared to reveal yet. I didn't respond, not because I was angry, but because I didn't know if I was ready to hear what else she'd buried. That evening, I took a long walk around the neighborhood. The sun dipped low, turning the buildings gold. Kids played cricket in the narrow street. A couple argued softly near a fruit stand. Life moved on around me as if nothing had cracked open. But everything had. Near the end of my walk, I passed by the old bookstore Layla loved. She hadn't been there in months, at least not with me. The owner, an elderly man with silver eyebrows, recognized me immediately. "Ah, Samir," he said warmly. "Where's your wife?" I froze. For the first time, I didn't know how to answer. "She's visiting family," I said quickly. He nodded, then smiled the kind of nostalgic smile people give when they think of something tender. "You two used to sit in the back corner and whisper like teenagers. Especially your wife. Always blushing, always smiling." I didn't know whether to smile or break. Before I could say anything, he handed me a book. "She pre-ordered this," he said. "Pick it up for her." My heart hammered in my chest as I took the wrapped package. When I got home, I placed it on the table but didn't open it. Not yet. I paced the living room, then finally sat down and unwrapped it. It was a journal. A blank, leather-bound journal with delicate floral embossing. Inside the cover was a handwritten note, in Layla's handwriting. For next year. A fresh start. A new chapter. Maybe a new us. My chest tightened painfully. She had bought it before everything fell apart. Before I found the messages. Before the accusations. Before her confession. And now, the journal felt like a ghost of the life we were supposed to have. I closed it gently. Then, finally, I texted her. "We need to talk." Her reply came within seconds. "I'm on my way." When she arrived, she didn't come inside. She waited outside the apartment building, standing under the streetlight like a shadow from a past life. I walked down slowly. We didn't hug. We didn't touch. We just stood there, facing each other. "Tell me everything," I said. "All of it. No more hiding." She swallowed hard, then nodded. And what she told me next changed everything again. After the hospital, she began slowly. I cut him out of my life. Completely. But he didn't cut himself out of mine. I felt a cold shiver slip down my spine. "He wrote to me," she whispered. "Not because he wanted me back, but because he wanted me to forgive him before he died." She closed her eyes. And I couldn't. I couldn't forgive the person who shattered me long before you ever loved me. The lump in my throat grew. She continued. "When I met you, I thought I was healed. I genuinely did. I wasn't thinking about him. I wasn't missing him. I wasn't comparing you to him." Her voice softened. "You were the first man who made me feel safe. Truly safe." My chest tightened. But when he came back, everything I had buried rose. The guilt. The unresolved pain. The part of me that never got closure. A tear slipped down her cheek. And I hated myself for feeling anything at all. Even pain. Even anger. I thought it meant I didn't love you enough. She shook her head, trembling. So I pulled away. I didn't cheat. But I also didn't give you the woman you deserved. The wind passed between us, carrying her trembling breath with it. I wasn't protecting him, she said. I was hiding the broken parts of me, so you wouldn't see how damaged I really was. Her voice cracked. I didn't tell you because I was terrified you would look at me differently. I stared at her, speechless. And when you did start looking at me differently, she whispered, I told myself I deserved it. Silence stretched between us. Long, heavy, devastating. Finally, she took a shaky breath. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to stay. Her eyes met mine, full of raw ache. I'm only asking you to understand that I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. And for the first time since everything fell apart. I believed her. But believing her didn't make it hurt less. It only made the hurt deeper. More honest. More real. We stood there under the streetlight, two people bound not by betrayal or anger anymore, but by a truth we had both feared for far too long. Love isn't destroyed by a single moment. It's destroyed by the moments you bury, the moments you don't share, the truths you hide to keep the peace, and end up shattering it instead. I exhaled slowly. This isn't something we fix in one night, I said. She nodded. I know. We're not the same people anymore. I know. But I took a breath that felt like it scraped my ribs. I don't want this to be the end. Her eyes widened, flooding with tears. Samir, I just don't know what the next step is yet. She whispered, whatever it is, we'll take it slowly. For the first time in months, her voice didn't sound distant. It sounded hopeful. Fragile, but hopeful. She reached for my hand, hesitated midway, then pulled back, letting me be the one to decide. I didn't take her hand. Not yet. But I didn't turn away either. And for tonight, that was enough. The night after we talked under the streetlight, I didn't sleep. Not even a little. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept replaying the moment Layla said she wasn't asking me to forgive her. That she only wanted me to understand. Something in that honesty, something in the way she didn't try to defend herself, left a heavy ache inside me I couldn't shake. By sunrise, the sky outside my window had turned pale blue. Birds were just beginning to stir, and for a moment, there was a strange calm in my chest. A fragile pause between storms. I didn't know what it meant, but it was enough to get me out of bed. I made coffee, something strong enough to force me awake. I sat at the kitchen table in silence, staring at the steam rising from the mug. My mind was crowded, but not in the frenzied, overwhelming way it had been before. This was a quieter chaos. A slower, deeper kind of confusion. I kept thinking about her journal. The blank one she had bought for a new chapter. It sat on the table near my elbow, untouched since I unwrapped it. A reminder of the life she'd hoped we could rebuild before everything fell apart. I didn't open it again. Not yet. Around 10 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was my daughter. Just seeing her name brought a tightness to my throat. I hadn't talked to either of my kids since everything with the jewelry happened, and even that felt like a separate storm I hadn't fully faced yet. Her message was simple. Dad, can we come by later? I stared at the screen, my heart sinking. I wasn't ready. Not for apologies. Not for explanations. Not for the weight of being a parent who had to balance disappointment with love. But they were my children, and I didn't want to push them away. Okay, I wrote back. Come at 5. I put the phone down and exhaled shakily. One storm at a time. I spent most of the afternoon cleaning the apartment, not because it was messy, but because I needed something to do with my hands. Something that didn't involve thinking. Something that didn't involve feeling every bruise on my heart. I washed dishes. I vacuumed the hall. I folded laundry. I wiped down counters already clean. I kept avoiding the framed photos on the shelf, the ones of Layla, the kids, and me. Every picture felt like a promise I wasn't sure we'd kept. By 4:30, the apartment looked spotless, and I still felt unprepared. I sat on the edge of the couch, elbows resting on my knees, trying to steady my breathing. When the doorbell finally rang at 5 p.m. sharp, I almost didn't stand. My legs felt heavy, my chest tighter than before. But I got up. I opened the door. My son and daughter stood there, both looking nervous, shoulders stiff, eyes uneasy. They weren't kids anymore, but in that moment, they looked painfully young, like they were bracing for bad news. Hi, my daughter said softly. My son just nodded. I stepped aside, letting them in. They walked into the living room with slow, uncertain movements, like entering a place holding fragile memories. We all sat. They took the couch. I sat across from them on the old armchair. The silence stretched thin. Finally, my son cleared his throat. We came to talk about everything. His voice cracked on the last word. My daughter looked at her hands, fidgeting with her sleeves. We messed up, she whispered. We know we did. I leaned back, exhaling. I'm glad you're here, I said quietly. But this isn't something we rush through. Start from the beginning. Tell me why you sold the jewelry. They exchanged a guilty look. My daughter started. We weren't thinking straight, she said. We were grieving too. And when we saw the jewelry box, it felt like holding her again. Like touching her. My son nodded, eyes glossy. But then the money, he continued. Dad, we didn't sell it because we wanted to hurt you. Or because we didn't care about Mom. It was stupid. We were desperate. Not for the money, but for something to fill the empty space. He paused, jaw tight. I thought if we got it appraised, maybe we'd understand her better. Like maybe it had some story we didn't know. My daughter cut in. And when the appraiser told us it was worth more than we expected, we panicked. We made the worst decision possible. We know that. We've known it from the second we walked out of that building. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Necessary. I rubbed my forehead. You should have told me, I said quietly. I wasn't just her husband. I was your father. You didn't have to hide from me. My daughter's eyes filled with tears. We were scared, she whispered. We thought you'd think we didn't care about her memory. My chest tightened. I never would have thought that. My son finally broke. Dad, he said, voice trembling. We don't know how to do this. We don't know how to live without her. Every time we try to remember her, we feel like we're doing it wrong. Every choice feels like a betrayal. Hearing him crack open like that, it shattered something inside me. All this time, I thought their silence was indifference, or carelessness, or selfishness. But it wasn't. It was grief. Raw, misdirected, aching grief. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. You didn't betray her, I said. You just didn't know how to carry her memory. My daughter wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. And you're mad at us, she whispered. Yes, I said honestly. But I'm not leaving you. They both exhaled at the same time, as if they'd been holding their breath for months. My son looked at me with shaky relief. We want to fix this, he said. We want to make it right. Please let us try. I nodded slowly. We will fix it, I said. But we're going to do it together. For the first time in a long time, I saw something hopeful in their faces. A small, fragile light. A beginning. After they left, the apartment felt strangely quiet. Not heavy, not tense, but calm. As if something long overdue had finally been released. I sat alone for a while, letting the emotions settle. The evening light filtered through the curtains, painting the room in gold. It reminded me of all the evenings Layla and I spent here, talking, reading, watching the world soften outside our window. I pulled the journal closer. For some reason, tonight, I felt ready to open it again. But before I did, my phone vibrated. It was Layla. A simple message. Are you okay? I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed. I talked to the kids today. She replied instantly. How did it go? Better than I expected. I wrote. Hard, but honest. There was a pause. Then, I'm glad. You deserve that. I almost typed something else. Something about us. About forgiveness. About what comes next. But instead, I closed the phone and placed it face down on the table. Tonight wasn't about the past. Or the pain. Or the choices we couldn't undo. Tonight was about space. Breathing space. Healing space. I opened the journal. The blank pages stared back at me. Soft, untouched, waiting. At the top of the first page, I wrote. Chapter 1. Learning to live again. The pen felt heavy in my hand. But not as heavy as before. Slowly, I exhaled. And for the first time in what felt like months, the breath didn't hurt. The next morning, something felt different when I woke up. Not fixed. Not healed. Just different. Lighter in small places. Heavy in others. But at least the whole weight wasn't crushing me the way it had been. I got out of bed slowly, like a man testing whether the floor beneath him would still hold. The sun pushed through the curtains with a soft, pale warmth. It wasn't enough to brighten the whole room, but it touched the edges of everything. My desk, the bookshelf, the empty chair where Layla used to sit. I stood there for a moment, staring at that chair. It was such an ordinary thing. Just wood and fabric. But it carried so many quiet memories. Nights when she'd read a book while I worked on bills. Mornings when she'd sit there brushing her hair. Evenings when she'd tuck her feet under herself and talk about her day. Now it was empty. Still. Waiting. I didn't touch it. Instead, I went into the kitchen and made tea instead of coffee. I needed something calmer in my hands. Something slower. Something that didn't hit me like a punch to the chest. As I waited for the water to boil, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from my brother. Checking in. How are things? I typed back. Complicated. But moving. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a short message. Good. Don't shut down. Whatever happens next, keep talking. I smiled slightly. That was his way of saying he cared. Short, blunt, but steady. After making tea, I walked back to the living room and opened the journal again. The blank page I wrote on last night stared back at me, the ink slightly smudged where my hand must have brushed it. Chapter 1. Learning to Live Again. I read it a few times. Then I closed the journal gently. It wasn't time to write more yet, but it was time to move. I showered, dressed, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, colder than usual, but refreshing in a way that made me breathe deeper. Leaves scattered across the sidewalk, crunching under my shoes. The neighborhood felt familiar but new at the same time, like I was seeing it through a different lens. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like hiding. I walked until I reached the small park near the apartment. The same park where Layla and I once spent slow Sunday mornings, sipping coffee from paper cups, talking about nothing urgent. The swings creaked softly. A couple of older men played chess near the fountain. A few kids chased each other around a tree, their laughter bright and weightless. I sat on a bench and let the quiet settle. A woman nearby pushed a stroller. She smiled as she passed. I nodded back. Something about that simple interaction, something ordinary and human, stirred something warm in my chest. Maybe hope. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe both. As I sat there, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Layla. Good morning. I hope today is gentle with you. A small part of me wanted to ignore the message, not out of anger, but out of fear of slipping too fast into something I wasn't ready for. But another part of me, the part that remembered the feel of her voice, the warmth of her hand, the years we shared, that part couldn't stay silent. I typed back, "Morning. I'm out for a walk." She replied almost instantly, "That sounds peaceful." I stared at her message for a long moment before typing again. "Would you want to talk later?" "Not about the past. Just talk." Her response took a little longer this time, but when it came, it was simple. "Yes, whenever you're ready." I didn't feel pressure in her words. No expectation. No desperation. Just willingness. A softness I had missed for too long. I spent the next couple of hours walking through the park, letting my thoughts drift. It struck me how little time I had given myself to grieve. Not just my wife, not just the jewelry, but the life I had before everything cracked open. I'd been trying to patch over the wounds with distraction, anger, suspicion. But grief didn't disappear just because you ignored it. By the time I walked home, the sun was higher, warming the pavement. I opened the apartment door and took a deep breath. The familiar scent of the place washed over me. Detergent, old books, and something faintly sweet from the candle Layla liked that still sat on the shelf. I sat down at the table again, the journal in front of me. I didn't open it this time. I just placed my hand on the cover. There were things I needed to say, words I hadn't spoken, fears I hadn't admitted. Not just to Layla, but to myself. Around noon, I texted her again. "Can you meet later this afternoon? Maybe at the riverside?" Her reply came like a soft exhale. "Yes, I'll be there." At 4 p.m., I walked toward the river. The path was lined with bending trees, their branches dipping toward the water. The sound of flowing currents was steady, almost comforting. That spot had become a symbol of everything raw and unspoken between us. As I approached, I saw her sitting on the same bench where she'd confessed everything. She looked smaller somehow, shoulders drawn in, hands clasped together. But when she lifted her eyes and saw me, she straightened slightly, like she didn't want to appear fragile, even though she was. I sat beside her, leaving a small but intentional space between us. We didn't speak for a while. The river filled the silence. "Finally," I said, "the kids came by." She turned toward me, her expression softening. "How did it go?" "It hurt," I said, "but it was good." They were honest. Her shoulders relaxed a little. "I'm glad," she whispered. I nodded. Then I exhaled slowly. "I need to tell you what I've been afraid of." Her eyes widened slightly, not with fear, but with readiness, like she had been waiting for this. I continued. I wasn't just scared you were cheating. I was scared I wasn't enough for you, that I never healed the parts of you someone else broke. She looked down at her hands, fingers tightening around each other. I never wanted you to fix me, she whispered. I just didn't know how to let myself be whole again. The wind brushed past us, stirring her hair. I'm trying to understand, I said, and I think part of me does now. But knowing the truth, it doesn't erase the pain. Tears welled in her eyes. I know, she said, and I'm sorry. For all the years I let my past live between us. I looked at her profile, the curve of her cheek, the way she blinked slowly as she held back emotion, the quiet strength she carried even in her trembling. We can't keep pretending we didn't break, I said. She met my eyes. No, we can't. But broken doesn't mean unfixable. Her breath hitched, just barely. I don't know what we're supposed to be next, I admitted. But I don't want to walk away without trying. Her voice was barely audible when she spoke. I'll try. Every day, if you'll let me. I didn't take her hand. I wasn't ready for that yet. But I didn't stand up and walk away either. I sat beside her as the sun set over the water, painting everything gold and soft. For a few quiet minutes, we just breathed the same air, two people learning how to rebuild, not from the pieces of what we lost, but from the truth we finally stopped running from. And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like something to approach. Slowly, gently, together maybe, or apart, if that's where healing took us. But at least with honesty now, at least with clarity, at least with open eyes. I didn't sleep that night, not because of fear or guilt, or even the confusion that had been tearing at me for weeks, but because, for the first time, I finally understood the quiet truth beneath everything. A truth I had been running from, distracting myself from, pretending didn't exist, even when it stood right in front of me. I had spent so long searching for answers in other people's actions that I completely ignored the answers in my own. Morning came slowly, bleeding gray light across the ceiling. I stayed exactly where I was, lying on the side of the bed I barely recognized anymore, listening to the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the faint noise of traffic outside. Everything sounded too normal for a life that had completely fallen apart. But that's how real endings work, I guess. They slip in quietly, without announcements, without dramatic music. They just settle. By the time I finally got up, the apartment felt foreign, like someone else's home, like I was trespassing in a version of my life that no longer fit me. I walked through the hallway, brushing my hand against the wall, half expecting to feel the warmth of old memories, but instead feeling nothing at all. There's a strange loneliness that comes after the heavy part of heartbreak passes. A loneliness that isn't loud or chaotic, but slow and echoing. I felt that echo with every step I took. My phone buzzed 3 times before I worked up the courage to check it. All 3 messages were from the same person. A name I once couldn't look at without feeling something warm in my chest. Now just a reminder of everything I'd been forced to learn the hard way. I didn't open them. Not yet. I just placed the phone face down on the table and let the silence take over again. Silence has a way of telling truths we try to avoid. I brewed coffee I barely tasted. Stared out the window at the people walking by on the street. Wondered how so many strangers could move through their lives so effortlessly while mine felt like a puzzle missing half its pieces. Eventually, I sat down, hands wrapped around a warm mug I didn't actually drink from. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't think about what had been done to me, or who betrayed whom, or which moment everything began to unravel. I thought about who I had become. A man who had spent months reacting, fighting, defending, breaking, surviving. A man who had been pushed so far into the corners of his own life that he forgot what it felt like to stand in the center of it. And as strange as it sounds, that realization hurt more than any betrayal. My phone buzzed again. This time a call. I knew who it was. Of course I did. There was a time I would have answered before the first ring even finished. A time when her voice was the only thing capable of grounding me. Now it felt like another chain I needed to loosen. The phone vibrated against the table, a low, persistent rumble. I stared at it until the call ended on its own. A small part of me expected relief, but instead, I felt this slow, sinking ache. Not because I missed her, but because I finally didn't. I stood up, walked to the window again, and let the sun hit my face as it climbed through the clouds. My chest felt strangely lighter. not healed. Healing isn't that generous, but lighter in the way a wound pulls less tightly as it closes. There was no plan, no dramatic decision, no sudden surge of inspiration, just one quiet truth. I didn't need to fix everything. I didn't need to chase explanations. And I didn't need to hold on to someone who had already let go of me long before I realized it. What I needed was to choose myself, even if it felt unfamiliar, even if it felt lonely, even if it felt like starting from nothing. I went back to the table, picked up my phone, and without opening any messages, without thinking twice, I typed the only words that felt honest. Please don't contact me anymore. My finger hovered over the send button, not out of doubt, but because I wanted to acknowledge the moment. The quiet breaking point. The line finally being drawn after everything. Then I pressed send. The message delivered instantly, and for the first time in a long time, I breathed like a free man. The moments after sending that message felt strangely motionless, like the world had paused just to watch what I would do next. I had never realized how heavy constant waiting could be, waiting for answers, for clarity, for the next hurt to land. When that weight finally slipped off my shoulders, the silence that replaced it felt almost unreal. I didn't check my phone again. I didn't need to. Whatever she would have said, whatever excuses or apologies or justifications she might have reached for, none of it mattered anymore. I wasn't the same man who would have clung to those words like lifelines. I walked to the bathroom and caught my reflection in the mirror. It startled me, not because I looked different, but because I actually looked at myself for the first time in months. There were shadows under my eyes and stress carved into the lines on my face. But beneath all of that was something I didn't expect. Calm. Not happiness. Not relief. Just a stillness I couldn't remember the last time I felt. I splashed water on my face, let it drip down my jaw, and stayed there for a moment, gripping the sink as if grounding myself back into my own life. Then I stepped back and took a slow breath. The apartment was unbearably quiet. So quiet I could hear the hum of my own thoughts, the ones I had been pushing down every night just to get through the next day. Without the chaos of heartbreak, without the storm of confusion, they sounded clearer. And they all pointed to the same thing. I had no idea who I was without this pain anymore. That realization didn't scare me as much as I expected. If anything, it felt like the first honest starting point I'd had in a long time. I grabbed my coat, not because I had anywhere specific to go, but because staying inside felt like standing in a graveyard of my own memories. The door clicked shut behind me, and the cold air hit my face like a reset button. Streets were busy, people rushing to jobs, errands, places that mattered to them. For once, I didn't feel behind them. I didn't feel lost in the noise. I just walked, past the bakery we used to stop at, past the bookstore where she'd once joked about us, growing old together, reading on opposite couches, past the cafe window where she had once waited for me with a warm smile I thought was meant only for me. Funny how the same places that once felt like a home can turn into museums of memories you didn't ask to revisit. I kept walking. I didn't want to be a curator of the past anymore. Eventually, I found myself at a small empty park bench near a row of trees. I sat down, letting the cold seep through my jeans, grounding me into the present moment. There was no one around, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the ache of being alone. It felt necessary. A thought hit me then, quiet, but sharp. I had spent so long fighting for someone who wasn't fighting for me, that I forgot how to fight for myself. That truth hurt, but it also felt like stepping onto solid ground after months of sinking sand. I leaned back, watching a few leaves fall off a branch in slow, drifting spirals. Seasons change whether we're ready or not. Maybe people do too. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. I didn't take it out. I didn't even wonder who it might be. For once, the urge to react, to rush towards someone else's needs, didn't rise in me. That impulse, the one that had shaped too much of my life, felt faint now, like a muscle finally allowed to rest. I sat there until my fingers went numb, until the wind stung my ears, until I felt like I belonged to the world again and not just to the wreckage of one person. And in that simple, cold, unremarkable moment, I made myself a quiet promise. I would rebuild, not for revenge, not to prove anything, not to replace what I lost, but to become someone I could recognize again, someone whose peace wasn't negotiable, someone whose heart didn't bend until it broke, someone who didn't disappear just to be loved. When I finally stood up from that bench, I felt something shift inside me. Not a dramatic rebirth. Life isn't that poetic. But a beginning. A small, steady one. And beginnings, I realized, don't need to be loud to be real. When I reached my apartment door that evening, I stood there for a long moment before opening it. Not because I was afraid of what waited inside, but because I finally understood that the space behind that door was not a battlefield anymore. It was just a place. For walls. A floor. A ceiling. Nothing more. The weight that once clung to it was gone. For the first time in months, I stepped inside without holding my breath. The air felt still, untouched, almost peaceful. I took off my shoes slowly, listening to the soft scrape against the floor, grounding myself in the simple act of returning. My coat went on the hook. My keys in the dish. My phone on the counter, still face down, still ignored. I moved through the room slowly, almost cautiously, taking in details I had grown numb to. The framed photo on the shelf, the faint scent of laundry detergent, the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. These things had been part of my life long before the chaos began. I realized then that healing wasn't about filling the emptiness. It was about clearing away the noise that never belonged there in the first place. I sat on the couch, the same couch that had witnessed more late-night arguments, restless thoughts, and silent tears than I ever admitted. But now, sitting there felt different. I could breathe. Not sharply, not with a trembling chest, but slowly, deeply, like someone learning the shape of calm again. A soft ache rose in my chest, not painful, but noticeable. It was the ache of letting go. The ache of accepting that some stories end whether or not we want them to. The ache of realizing that love alone cannot hold two people together when trust has eroded piece by piece. I leaned back and closed my eyes. In that darkness, I didn't see her face. I didn't replay our fights. I didn't revisit the betrayal. Instead, I saw myself. The version of me who existed before I learned how sharp love could become, and the version who now knew the truth of that sharpness. It was strange to feel both of those men inside me at once. One hopeful, one wounded, both trying to make sense of how things had fallen apart. But something else surfaced too, something fragile but steady. A sense of direction. Not a plan, not a solution, just a direction. A pull toward feeling like myself again. Toward reclaiming the parts of me I had given away without realizing it. When I opened my eyes, the room looked the same, but I felt like I was seeing it from a different vantage point, as if the months of heartbreak had fogged up every window in my life, and now the glass had finally cleared. On the coffee table sat an old notebook I hadn't touched in years. Back when life felt lighter, I had used it to write things, little reflections, pieces of thoughts, feelings I didn't know how to say out loud. I picked it up, half expecting the pages to feel like a stranger's handwriting. But reading my own words written before all of this, surprised me. There was hope in them. Curiosity. Warmth. A softness I didn't realize I had lost. I turned through the pages slowly, letting each sentence remind me of who I used to be. Someone who trusted easily. Someone who believed love was enough. Someone who smiled at small things and dreamed without hesitation. A part of me mourned that version of myself. Another part wanted to meet him again. I found a blank page near the back. At first, I just stared at it, unsure if I had anything worth writing. But eventually, my hand moved on its own, forming words I had been holding inside for too long. I will not let this break me. I paused. The words looked too final, too neat. My life wasn't a clean line, and neither was my healing. So I continued, letting the truth spill out without judgment. I don't know who I'm becoming yet, but I'm trying. I placed the pen down and let the quiet sit with me. It wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't heavy. It felt like honesty, raw and imperfect. I looked toward the window. Outside, the city lights glowed softly against the night sky. People were out there living, loving, hurting, healing, everyone carrying their own weight. And for the first time, I didn't feel like my world was smaller or darker than anyone else's. I didn't feel left behind. I just felt human, broken in some places, growing in others, still learning how to move forward. And moving forward didn't feel impossible anymore. The night stretched on, gentle and unhurried. I stayed awake in that quiet, not because I was afraid to sleep, but because I finally felt present in my own life again. And in that presence, I understood something I hadn't been able to face before. Losing her wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of finding myself. The next morning, I woke with a strange lightness in my chest. Not happiness, not relief, just acceptance. I realized that life hadn't stopped for me while I was busy unraveling in the past. People moved on. Seasons changed. And somehow, slowly, I had learned to move with them instead of against them. I made coffee and watched the sun rise over the rooftops. The way the light spilled across the buildings felt gentle, almost like a quiet promise. Not a guarantee, not a fix, just a soft reassurance that the world didn't have to be cruel or chaotic all the time. That maybe, just maybe, I could start again. I thought about my children, my son and daughter. I thought about the fear and grief that had driven them to make mistakes, and I thought about the courage it took to face me afterward. I realized then that love isn't only about protection. It's also about forgiveness and the ability to grow, even when the path is messy. The journal sat on the table, blank pages waiting. I picked it up and ran my fingers over the cover. Slowly, carefully, I opened it to a new page. My pen hovered over the paper, and I wrote without planning, without fear. I am learning to live, to love myself, to trust again, to let the past exist without letting it control me. I paused, reading the words. They were simple, but true. And truth, I realized, was stronger than any pain, any betrayal, any secret. I thought about Layla, about the choices we'd made, the mistakes, the secrets, and the long, quiet ache of what we had lost. But I also realized that our story didn't define me. It was a part of my life, yes, but not the whole. The pieces that remained, my children, my memories, my own heart, those were mine to keep, mine to cherish, mine to rebuild. And in that moment, I understood the most important thing I had learned through all of this. Life doesn't give perfect moments. It doesn't give perfect people, and it doesn't give perfect endings. But it does give us choices. Small, quiet choices every day. To forgive, to let go, to heal, to move forward, to exist in our own skin with honesty, patience, and courage. I placed the pen down and exhaled deeply. For the first time in a long while, the breath didn't carry the weight of fear. It was just breath. I looked out the window. The city hummed softly, people rushing, birds calling, traffic moving in its endless rhythm. And for the first time, I felt like I was part of it. Not broken, not lost, not defined by the mistakes of the past. Just here, just alive. I smiled quietly to myself. Not because everything was perfect, but because I was okay with imperfection. Because I had survived the heartbreak. Because I had survived the betrayal. And because I was learning, finally, how to survive myself. The sun climbed higher. I knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. I knew there would be days when grief and doubt would press down again. But I also knew this. I could face them. Not because I had someone else to lean on, though I did, but because I had found the strength to stand on my own. And that, I realized, is the truest kind of healing. The day stretched before me, quiet, ordinary, and full of possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to live it fully. Not for anyone else. Not to prove anything. But for me. And that, I thought, is how life begins again.